Hey, what's up? It's Bond, and today I'm going to talk about game ownership. That may seem like a very vague topic or a very broad one, but it comes off the light of these articles and this conversation that began when an employee at Ubisoft did an interview, and the actual conversation was about game subscriptions and how people should get used to subscribing to their games and maybe not necessarily owning them. And what was interesting was this really loud reaction came from this article. People didn't read it. The article wasn't really that inflammatory, and his interview and his answers weren't that big of a deal. But what I'm going to address is the reaction from people who didn't read it, and this kind of guttural scream I saw of people being like, "No, I'm never not going to own my games. This is blasphemy." And what I want to talk about very quickly, and I just want to let people know, you don't own your games. You may own some of your games. If you have some old consoles and things like that, especially where you have hardware, where you have media, if it's hopefully not disintegrating, because if it's on disk, if it's on cartridges, it probably is slowly one way or the other. You own those games, sure. You can plug that thing into the wall, into a TV, stick the cartridge in or the disc and play it. You don't need to plug it in. You don't need to have your subscription going. You don't need online access. It just works. That hasn't really been the case for a really long time. And you need to understand and realize that if you have digital games and some even disc games on any console platform, if you have your library in Steam, you don't own any of those games, and you are leasing those games for the most part. You are basically being allowed to play them as long as you play nice. Now, sure, maybe you've paid 50, 60, $70 for games on your Xbox or in Steam or on your EA account or whatever. But what you need to realize is that at any time, and this has happened recently, say you have 30 games on EA's PC store, and that's where you access them, that's where you play them, that's where you download them from. If you break any of EA's many rules, whether it's conduct within a game, by the way you talk or act, or you cheat, you modify the game illegally, and they cut you off from your account, all your games are gone. This can happen on Steam as well. It can happen on Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo. Nintendo is actually kind of an exception because they do have a large number of games where you can just have a cartridge and your Switch and you're good for the most part. But, on any of the modern consoles, the PlayStations, the Xboxes, the PCs, there's very few games left anymore where you can just put an executable file on your hard drive and play it with no one else's permission. And people need to realize that when they're getting all huffy and puffy about this article and this conversation that sprang from it, that you may not own all the games you think you do. So, just throwing it out there, something to consider. Maybe before you freak out about this article, just because it's Ubisoft and everyone, is happy to freak out whenever Ubisoft says or does anything, sometimes justifiably. You may want to read some of your end user license agreements, and you may want to understand just how much you own the games on the various platforms that you may have games on. I think you would be very surprised to find out that it's pretty few and far between that you actually own anything at all. The last thing I'll touch on here is this is especially an issue with live service games and always online games. One of my favorite games, and if you're on this channel, you may or may not know this. One of my favorite games of all time is The Division and The Division 2. One day, those games will not be playable. One day, they will shut those servers down and we will never play those games again. And I've seen people say, like, oh, well, they could just patch, private servers, or they could, move over server side stuff to the client and you'd be able to play it still. And that won't happen. One, because it's almost certain the engines these games are built on, when they were built, were never designed to do any of that. They were designed to work the way they work, and that's it. And it's likely that it just isn't possible from a power perspective, too. The example of The Division, that game, all of its AI happens on the server side and gets sent to you. That's why when you lose connection, you can play around for a few minutes before the game recognizes it, but all of the NPCs will just stop. because they're not getting directions anymore. And maybe there is a way where one day before they shut those games down, or the other live service games that do the same thing, or even some single player games who do the same thing, maybe they can fix it, maybe they can patch it, but it's very likely they can't or they won't. So think about whether you own these games, think about whether these games are sustainable long run, and maybe think about that before you get mad about something that could be happening, because maybe it already has. Let me know what you think about that. Let me know how you feel about game ownership and all those things down in the comments. If you like the video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you want some more of this. You can also check out the rest of my catalog, my other videos, my Mass Effect stuff, the Division stuff. I've got 2 podcasts. The Bonfire podcast is the weekly gaming podcast. The Mass Effect Hypecast is talking about the next game as much as I can right now. I also stream over on Twitch. You can find me in all of these places and all over the internet as Bon Diesel. That's all I have for this one. So until next time.